What kind of people Gang Stalk? They are the sick among us, the product of our insane society. The metaphor of original sin describes what happens. In the state of nature, there is an uninterrupted flow between within and without. Animals, and we are animals, have an inner sense, are guided by an unconscious, nonverbal knowing from within. Read Psychoanalysis and Cognitive Science by Bucci about the multiple code theory of how information is processed. Then at infancy, our families of origin socialize us, and what happens is often imposition and the development of ego. No longer are we primarily guided by our inner sense, but where an inner directedness should be, an outer directedness develops, composed of shoulds and musts. We become self-conscious, making ourselves as an object, like objects in our environment, to be studied and manipulated to conform to outer imperatives. You can think of Adam and Eve in the metaphor of the Garden of Eden, eating of the tree of knowledge. It is when we think we know, ego, that the disharmony from the state of nature begins. In the state of nature, there is the emptiness of not knowing. There is doing, unconscious doing, an uninterrupted flow of information from within to without, what can be called acting from an inner sense rather than outer authority. Going sane would entail reconnecting with our inner sense of things, what is important to us. The opposite is what we see in government gang stalking. An undifferentiated mob of people acting from authority, losing their individuality, their uniqueness, now totally driven from without. In progressive schools, the type Noam Chomsky went to, this inner directedness is nurtured. What D.W. Winnicott called an unfolding of one's nature takes place, with a consequence of a person like Chomsky, who is well differentiated, who has an intellectual thinking system separate from his emotional system, who can think. What is thinking? It is formulating the unformulated, unconscious putting it into words. Thus, the person who can think for themselves is creative, always coming up with the new. They surprise us. They are original. This is the crux of a sane society. People who are well differentiated, individuals who think their own thoughts, who are introspective, inner directed, who are in touch with their inner sense. Because they don't treat themselves as objects to be molded into a mental representation, largely outer directed, of what they should be, because they follow their own inner sense, they allow others to be that way too. With their strong sense of I, strong sense of self, they can say thou. They are not threatened by differentness. They can listen because they are not afraid of being drawn into the other in emotional undifferentiation. They can think. They can stand their ground. But, two, because of their strong sense of self, they are not afraid to go over to the other side and really listen. Real speaking and real listening, dialogue, is the outcome of the I-thou relationship of which only those with a strong sense of self can partake. A sane society would have educational institutions that were highly diverse, offering choice to the many different personality types in our country. They would be non-authoritarian institutions where teachers were guides, facilitators, who recognize their mission of unfolding the potential inherent in each individual. Such a society would have a diverse media where thinking abounded, thinking together, which would unleash a profound creativity. Mental models would be examined, assumptions collectively looked at. Such a thinking society would not be driven by primitive emotions. Rather, there would be emotional clarity, as emotional intelligence would be taught in our schools. An outcome of such emotional intelligence would be integration, a congruence, an authenticity, where people would walk their talk and not project unintegrated, unconscious selves onto others. In contrast, today, we see split selves, the preacher who is living a double life, vast numbers of people who say all the right things but don't walk their talk. there is a lack of integration. This disunity is the result of imposition, which, as D.W. Winnicott describes, is sown in families that don't provide the facilitating environment we need for the unfolding of our nature. Information is the key to transforming our society. The internet is our hope. The spread of information can help facilitate formulating the unformulated, connecting our unconscious to our conscious, breaking free of the knots that may be tying us up locally.